Well, it's Monday morning once again. Don't they just come round so quickly? But what better way to start the new week than a quick chat about fishing in the Caloundra area, and particularly land-based fishing in the Caloundra area? Because I know we have lots of listeners in southeast Queensland, but I also know that Caloundra is a very, very popular tourist destination, and a lot of people that travel there do so with the intent of doing some fishing while they're there. And the great news is everything is very close, and the opportunity to walk out of your hotel room or out of your holiday apartment and down to the waterfront and be fishing within a few minutes for a whole range of species off the beach or in the estuary or around the canal systems or jetties. There's just tons and tons and tons of places to fish. So that's what we'll cover in today's episode. And I should mention also that today's episode is thanks to Caloundra Fishing World, which is your one-stop fishing shop when you're in the Caloundra area. So if you're in Caloundra, you're looking for tackle and you want more advice on where to go fishing, definitely drop into Caloundra Fishing World. You'll find them at 7 and 8 Tay Street, right between Boardwalk Street and the Esplanade. Can't miss them. Big Mangrove jack out the front. And Dave and Andy will make sure you're set up with all the right gear and all the information you need to catch some fish while you're in Caloundra. Now, you can also visit these guys online at rockstartackle.com.au, or you'll find them on Instagram and TikTok under the handle Rockstar Tackle. Definitely worth following them online, or for those that live away from Caloundra, placing an order on their online store. So make sure you check that out. Now, having said all that, today's guest is in fact Dave Granville from Caloundra Fishing World, a man who's fished in the Sunshine Coast area for many, many years, lives and breathes fishing 7 days a week now in Caloundra, and knows the fishing spots and has his finger on the pulse in every way when it comes to the fishing. So without any further build-up, let's start today's episode of the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast.
This is the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast, where our mission is to help everyday sports fishers experience extraordinary lure fishing. If next level fishing is your dream, then let us provide the tools and information that will bring that dream to life. Tune in as our expert hosts chat with Australia's best anglers and share their tips for success. Then check out our website. It's one of Australia's largest and most popular online fishing resources. But right now, settle in to listen as ALF founder Greg Doc Lures Vinyl delivers today's episode through the nerdy lens of a scientist, lure maker, and sport fishing tragic.
Well, hey folks, welcome to a new episode of the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast. Today we are headed for the Caloundra area, and I've got my good mate here, Dave Granville, on board. Dave, welcome back to the show, mate. Long time since we spoke.
Yeah, hey Greg, it has been a while, buddy.
I think the last time we spoke, it was all about billfish, wasn't it?
Most likely, yep.
Yeah.
I have done a bit of that in my time, but not as much these days. Too busy running a tackle shop.
So when you're not fishing, you're in amongst fishing tackle, mate. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not. That might drive you nuts.
Yeah, well, it's hard to keep the addiction at bay, but when you can get things for the right price, it just seems, a good reason to own even more tackle.
That's right. There's no excuse for not having everything you need when you get out in the water. So, mate, we're going to have a great chat today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation, because what we're going to do is explore 5 land-based fishing spots around the Caloundra area. We're going to go through what you'll catch there, what lures to use, a few tips and techniques for each of those spots. And of course, we're going to talk about how people can come into your store and get even more information and grab a bit of tackle as well. So,
yeah,
mate, you've got 5 spots in mind?
Oh, absolutely. It'll be hard to keep it to 5.
Yeah.
That's one beauty about Caloundra area. There's heaps and heaps of land-based spots, and in actual fact, land-based fishing around here is particularly popular. It's very much a holiday town, so a lot of people come from interstate and they stay in Caloundra in the high-rises, and you can walk to many of the spots which suits them. They come in the shop, buy their lures, and then head down and catch a feed.
Yeah, perfect. All right, mate. So 5 spots is not going to be a problem. Narrowing it down to 5 spots might be a problem, but we'll see what we can do. Before we do that, though, I mean, as we record this now in sort of the late summer period, I guess, the last month of summer, we've got the autumn months ahead of us. What's the fishing like in the Caloundra area over that period? What are the species that we're likely to come across?
Yeah, to be honest, we're a little bit in between seasons for inshore at the moment. There's always whiting, there's always flathead, but right now it's not prime time for either.
Right.
Yeah, the passage is as a very shallow passage, but a lot of the listeners may or may not realise that there's been a massive change recently. So the old bar between Caloundra and Bribie Island actually closed up. And a new bar broke through Bribie Island. So basically there's two Bribie Islands now. There's a Bribie Island South and a Bribie Island North. So Bribie Island North is basically connected to Caloundra, to Happy Valley. So massive amount of sand and a lot of changes to the waterway. So we are still kind of getting to know the Pumicestone Passage, or the northern end of the Pumicestone Passage again now, purely because a lot of our traditional spots and sandbanks change with that new bar.
Yeah, that will certainly keep you on your toes, mate, and change things around so that you've got to basically go back to the drawing board and start again.
Yeah, but having said that, reading water doesn't change. And, even though the fish might be in a slightly different spot than they were 2 years ago, there's still plenty of country. And certainly, whiting, brim and flathead are your staples here. We do get a run of tailor. Since the new bar's broken through, because it's quite a wide open entrance, nothing is a surprise catch anymore in the passage. There's a lot more pelagic coming in. We're getting a lot of golden trevally, queenfish, even the odd mackerel inside the passage, which is pretty crazy when you're fishing for a flatty or something and you hook a Spanish mackerel. But anyway, and that's rare. But it just goes to show that the new bar has changed things a lot here. And while it probably has slowed down the fishing a little bit in the far northern end of the passage, from the new bar south, the fishing's never been better.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, once you go south, I'm just thinking back to my time on the Sunshine Coast, and it was always around Caloundra, that northern end of the passage, it was a clear water, blue water sort of a spot. And then as you move down further south into the passage, you're starting to get into the mangrove territory a little bit more. And so you start to get a little bit more tannin in the water, a bit more colour. You get, the jacks start to turn up and that sort of thing as well.
Yeah. Correct. Not a real lot has changed, except all the clean water now is pretty much coming through the new bar. So the very, very top end, it's not quite a lake, but it's certainly the water flow has slowed up a lot in that very northern part. So Caloundra Township itself, people would probably be familiar with the Boardwalk, which is a very popular fishing spot. That area, the water flow has slowed, which has its pros and cons, because that was sort of the first port of call for a fish coming in the old bar, but it was very hard to fish because of the amount of water flow. So you could really only fish it on the tide changes, whereas now you can fish it right through the tide. So for families that just want to easily throw a line and have a bit of fun, the Boardwalk is still one of the prime spots to fish. And in fact, that was going to be my number one land-based spot.
Right, we're going to squeeze an extra one out of you now, because you've given us that one for free.
Given us one for free. So, No, look, the Boardwalk used to be really popular with people fishing for luderick as well.
Yes.
It was because it had that water flow and rock wall and weed, etc. The old timers used to line up on there with their floats and have a great time chasing the luderick. But unfortunately, the closing of the bar has completely shut that fishery down. But it probably has opened up other species. So this year we had an incredible situation off the Boardwalk where a big school of frogmouth pilchards had moved into that area and pretty much stayed there for weeks. And we had a big influx of mainly kale trevally, which are not super common species of trevally, I suppose, and a very cool looking critter and good fun to catch. So all the little groms were down there with their little plastics and their little micro jigs and metals, having a great old time on those trevally.
Yeah.
So,
There was always, when it was open, the water used to fairly whistle through there, but now I guess it must just rise and fall with the tide, I'd imagine. But there was always a run of queenfish there over the winter period, wasn't there?
Yeah, we still get the queenies. They're mainly small. Like every now and again you'll get one that's pushing a metre, but most of the time they're pretty small, but certainly more than happy to eat a lure. The young kids around town, they're all mad into their micro jigging these days. So we sell the little micro jigs flat out. They seem to catch just about everything.
Yeah, awesome. All right, mate. So that's spot zero we've got covered off there is the Boardwalk. So
that's the closest spot to my shop as well. Caloundra Fishing World is literally a good footy kick from the Boardwalk.
Yeah, yep.
We're right there. So anyone fishing off the Boardwalk, they can literally walk down and grab whatever they need.
Yeah, you can buy one lure, and if you lose it, you can walk back and buy another one.
Exactly. 5 minutes later, you're back in the game.
Very good. All right, mate. So let's list off another 4 spots to start with, and then I know that you got one really special spot that we're going to talk about, and we might be a little bit cautious about how much we give away, but let's talk about the first of your other 4 spots, I guess.
Sure. Well, I suppose whenever you think land-based, the first thing that comes to mind is jetties, really. And the next probably most iconic land-based spot in Caloundra is Military Jetty. And it's a pretty amazing spot. There's an old ramp there. I probably should know more about the history of Military Jetty, actually. But don't ask me that. But basically, it's at the mouth of the Pelican Waters Canals. And with the new bar, it's getting all the flow. So basically, Military Jetty is the new Boardwalk. So the current absolutely rips past there. And, you do have to fish it either on the northern or southern side of the jetty. It's very hard to fish it straight out front because of the tide. But it's probably one of the most popular spots in Caloundra now, and it's a great spot to get bait. You can jig herring there, you can jig yellowtail pike there, you can throw the cast net, get live bait. So I know this is a lure fishing podcast, but at the end of the day, sometimes you got to use bait. But yeah, look, the guys that are fishing lures off there, soft plastics reign supreme, either bouncing rubbers off the bottom for flatties or fishing them a bit faster for, as you say, your queenfish, your trevally, tailor, things like that. So it's definitely probably these days the number one land-based fishing spot in the northern end of the Pumice-Stone Passage, I would say.
All right. So walk us through. You said that it gets a fair bit of flow there now with the new entrance. So any tides or any conditions that are unfishable, and conversely, what are the best times to turn up there and throw a lure?
Not at all. You can literally fish it round the clock. You just have to. It can get a bit busy sometimes, and of course, if it's a run-in tide, you're fishing from north to south, so you need to be on the southern side of the jetty, and if it's a run-out tide, conversely, you have to be on the northern end. So the northern end probably fishes the best because it faces towards the mouth of the Pelican Waters Canal, and it's also got the old ramp there, lots of rocks, so it's just a structure that attracts fish and bait, and obviously that's why predators go there. So, I would have to say, if you had to pick a tide, run out would be better.
Okay.
Just because you're fishing in the right direction towards most of the structure.
Okay. And in terms of lures, you said soft plastics are the go. Give us a little bit more detail on that, mate, in terms of style, sizes, weighting, rigging, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. A real revelation in recent times has been the introduction of the Rapala Crush City range. Z-Man was probably the most popular plastic that we sold until the Crush City range came along, and they've just, for some reason or another, they just seem to have really hit a chord with our local anglers, and they're getting results. So, there's a couple of lures in that range that are working particularly well here. It's called the Imposter, which is basically a prawn/yabby imitator. And of course, the Pumice-Stone Passage is full of prawns and full of yabbies. So it's no real surprise that lure works well here. And then probably stepping it up a little bit, chasing jacks and the bigger flathead. Also in that range, they've got a 4-inch paddle tail called the Heavy Hitter. And that seems to imitate our potty mullet, our whiting, that neck size bait fish, I guess.
Okay.
And that also seems to be fishing particularly well in this area. And I don't normally get too brand specific because obviously we stock everything at the shop, but it has been quite an eye-opener. Normally a new lure comes out and, there's a bit of hype at the start, but then it all dies down, but we can't keep them on the shelves.
If I remember right, I think the Heavy Hitter, they've got a couple of different paddle tails in the...
Correct. Yeah, there's a smaller one as well. And so I think there's a 3-inch and the 4-inch is the one that seems to be working particularly well on the bigger fish. Yeah, you get school dew there, you get mangrove jacks, and even the odd sneaky barra gets around there as well.
Now you got my attention now, mate. I do like this barra. I do like the jacks as well. Rigging these things up, mate.
Yeah.
Presumably you might have a few different weight jig heads and that sort of thing, given that you have different flow conditions.
Correct.
Any tips there?
Yeah. So most of the time we start with about a 1/4 ounce. That's our starting point, and then we go either side of that. So if you got a bit of flow, you'll probably go to a 3/8. maximum probably a half ounce. There are not too many scenarios where you can't get to the bottom with a 3/8, but 3/8 to a half when it's running, and then when it's not, quarter down to 1/6 or 1/8. Like there are different, if you're fishing shallower, of course, you go lighter, but you always want to make sure you got some hang time, not just a rock on the bottom.
Yeah, yep. Presumably you're fishing here with a jig head with an exposed barb. You're not making them weedless? Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, there's no real need to fish weedless here. Pretty friendly country, and I often refer to weedless as fishless because you certainly get a lot more bites than hookup. But no, definitely exposed jig head. And probably the only other tip I would say with plastics is plenty of scent. Big fan of scent. I wouldn't even chuck plastic in the water without scent.
Yep. Okay. Cool. And any tips for working these lures, mate?
Yeah, so it depends on what you're chasing. Flathead, obviously, no-brainer. You've got to keep contact with the bottom. And so you're always making sure that you're bouncing off the bottom. Like I said, sort of double hops and getting some hang time is definitely the key. Invariably you get bit on the drop as it's coming back down. If I'm fishing for jacks and barras, I'll fish differently. It'll be a slow roll or even a fast burn, just depending on where I am and what structure I'm sort of fishing over. But with the paddle tails, they seem to work well in a roll or a burn and a hop. But certainly your prawn imitators, it's always about keeping contact with the bottom and making sure that you're hopping them up off the bottom.
So reasonably gentle lifts and then keeping in touch with the lure as it sinks back down. Is that the strategy with the prawn imitations?
There are times where you get a bit more radical
aggressive,
with your whips. You just got to see what they're liking on the day. Some days they like it subtle and some days they like it a bit more active. So, you just got to work through your routines and see what's working on the day. Yeah.
And I guess, clearly when you see prawns busting up and skipping and jumping, that's usually a time when you got to work the lure a bit faster, isn't it?
Yeah, when the prawns are getting chased, in our neck of the woods anyway, that generally means whiting, the odd trevally as well. But generally when we see the prawns skipping, that's when it's time to get out the little surface lures and chase the whiting.
Okay. And what surface lures are you throwing at those?
Yeah, so there's little Basto sugar pens are probably, number one, and then your MMD splash prawns, 70mm MMD splash prawns are probably number two. There's a bunch of other little surface stick baits and surface walkers and poppers that do the job, but certainly, again, in the shop, sugar pens and splash prawns would be our number two sellers when it comes to that. And with the addition of some little assist hooks on them, so rip the rear treble off and put some assist hooks on.
Yep, really important for the whiting because you're going to miss a lot of bites if you don't do that.
100%.
Yep. Okay, so that's Military Jetty, mate. Is there anything else we need to know about fishing that particular location? Time of day, is that important or is it really tide?
Oh, look, there's always natural bite periods, low light periods are always good, but I think tide, throughout the passage, tide plays a far bigger role than time of day. That said, it's amazing how in the middle of the night when everything's quieting down and all the boats are gone and super quiet, that generally seems to be when some really big fish get caught.
Yes. Yep.
So when most of us are sleeping, there's the odd keen guy down there catching meat or somethings.
And trust me, folks, if anyone who has any doubts, fish can find a lure in the dark. Absolutely no problems whatsoever.
Oh, yeah. So, that is for sure.
All right. So let's move on from Military Jetty, mate. What's spot number 2 around the Caloundra area?
So one of the things that has happened as a result of the bar closing, or the old bar closing, is you can actually walk from Happy Valley or Caloundra Township along the northern end of Bribie neck. So you can actually walk to the new bar, and it's not that far. It's only about a kilometre walk.
Okay.
So it's a really nice walk because you walk down the surf side, and there's always a couple of gutters on that eastern side of Bribie. So if you fancy a flick into the surf, you got chance for tailor and a dart and trevally and things like that in the surf there. Yep. And then once you actually reach the bar, the new bar, there's a heap of sunken timber. Basically, when Bribie broke through, you can imagine that all the trees and that were on the island ended up strewn throughout the passage and obviously particularly through that new bar area. So not only do you have a heap of water flow, but you've got a heap of structure as well.
Yep,
so it's tick, 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 really. So really a walk down Bribie and then fishing into the new bar is probably one of the newer land-based spots that has to be on your list, I reckon.
Sounds amazing. So walk us through tides, walk us through lures, and give us any tips.
Yeah, so because
it
it does flow so hard there, you do have to kind of try and fish it on a tide change.
Yep.
And it doesn't really seem to matter whether it's on the bottom or the top. If I had to pick one, I'd say the high tide fish is better, but it's a little bit harder to get there on the high tide, of course, because you're trundling along the sand dunes. But it's, again, soft plastic's one of the prime candidates, and again, probably that heavy hitter or something similar. You could even go to more of a jerkbait style in that scenario as well, and probably even, you might find you will have to go to that half-ounce jig head because it does proper flow through there. But being quite snaggy, you've got to be prepared to lose a bit of gear. But there's some absolute crocodile flathead living in there now. It reminds me a lot of the jumping pin bar area where you've got lots of trees and lots of big flathead, and that's what's happened now. So those flathead, particularly obviously, September, October, when it's spawning season, they're quite prolific. And of course, we're catch and releasing those big girls, but
yes,
there's always a few little males hanging around to grab a feed if you want to feed a flatties.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. All right, and so strategy there, mate, is it basically just walk along fanning out casts and obviously putting them close to structure that you can see, looking for
100%.
signs of bait?
There's a fair bit of area to fish there. You can actually, it's not just one little corner. You can absolutely walk for probably 200 or 300 metres. There's a drain that runs through from the new bar area into the lagoon, as we call it. So there's sort of another section that has flow moving through there. So the old story, no run, no fun, but we're always looking for places for fish to use the current to their advantage, ambush bait as it's coming through. So it's just using your eyes and looking at natural spots. But of course, if you've got current hitting a nice big tree, well, that's a good place to start your effort, And
I guess the piece of advice I'd have for anyone doing that is don't just walk up and make your first cast right into that snag. Work your way around it, put plenty of casts in from a distance first, and work your way up to it, because a lot of the time the fish are sitting off the snag, right? Yeah,
and sometimes they're sitting in front of it, sometimes they're sitting behind it, and obviously sometimes the bait is right on the tree, whereas, the fish will be sitting waiting for those stragglers to fall off the main bait school, and that's what you try and imitate with your lure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I'm a flathead and the bait are all in a big ball in a snag like that, the last thing I'm going to do is go and disperse them. I'll just wait on the edges, and every time one comes past, I'll pick it off.
Exactly, yeah.
Very good. All right, so a pretty good rundown there. I think there's probably not too much more, and this is other species that we could be targeting there as well. Yeah,
trevallies as well, and queenies and stuff. But, when the new bar broke through, for the first 6 months at least anyway, it was incredible fishing. Like Andy, my business partner at the tackle shop, he walked down there one afternoon, and I think it was just a fisher cast, and he got something like 7 different species off the bank there. There was tailor, queenfish, GTs, golden trevally, flathead. Anyway, I can't remember them all, but it was pretty impressive.
Yeah. And presumably with those pelagic species, is that something you'd fish a little bit further from the turn of the tide and you'd work your lures a bit faster?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you kind of don't have a choice. Once that tide starts running, you have to fish faster. And as you say, those pelagic fish you can either go to more of a jerk bait style and fish it faster. You don't probably need to stay with a paddle tail, or you can go to a metal. The old Halco twisty is an absolute beauty in that scenario, and a few other little metals and stuff like that. But we were doing really well on the little twisties there earlier in the year.
Man, I used to use those twisties when I was a kid, and they're still around and they still catch fish.
Sure do.
And they're a well-priced lure as well. So anyone who's fishing that area, let's go and stock up some of those at
and a good Aussie company to boot.
Yeah, perfect. All right, mate, let's move on to spot number 3. So we've got Military Jetty, we've got Bribie Island Bar. Where's the third spot?
No worries. Well, where are we going to go next? I reckon we should do a bit of surf fishing.
Oh, nice.
So Shelley Beach is a gorgeous little spot. It's protected from the southerly, So it's a good spot in a southerly, which is probably our predominant wind here. So you can sort of tuck behind the headland. And yeah, it's because it's got rock adjacent to the beach, you get a real mix of species there. So you get obviously your whiting and your bream and your tarwine and things like that. But if you fish a bit bigger lures, then quite often you'll get a snapper or squire and then sweet lip, things like that. And of course, you know, there's always a chance of a tailor or a mulloway in that area as well. So one of the great spots if you want to fish the beach. We get a lot of our holiday makers in town, you know, staying in the holiday units in that area, and it's great for them just to literally walk down with a rod in their hand and have a flick off the beach. And it's a gorgeous spot, very picturesque. So yeah, that would probably be another spot that would be high on the list just to mix it up rather than being in the passage, because Caloundra does have surf and rock and estuary all at its doorstep. Yeah.
And for those with a boat, there's inshore and blue water as well, right on the doorstep too. We're not going to touch on those so much today. But,
yeah.
But yeah, and look, I remember fishing Shelley Beach. So this is the area between, well, you kind of got two headlands, haven't you, on a beach in between. So you got Moffat, is it Moffat Headland to the north?
Correct. So you got the main Caloundra head, then you got Shelley, and then you got Moffat. And to be honest, Moffat and Shelley are quite similar in the way that you would approach them. So I could have picked Shelley or Moffat, to be honest, but just to mix it up, I chose one rather than the other.
That's fine. I've just squeezed another spot out of you, so we're really starting to rack them up now.
Well, that's right. Yeah, so fish Moffat exactly the same way as you fish Shelley.
Well, let's walk through how to do that, mate. So, I mean, the rock platforms here, this is not like, you know, sort of Sydney coastline rock platforms and steep cliffs, is it?
So the headland itself has some rock platforms, but when we talk about Shelley and Moffat, we're actually generally talking about fishing the beach itself.
Okay. Yep.
So you're fishing the beach adjacent to the rocks rather than off the rocks. The whole rock fishing scenario is another whole deal. And to be honest, I don't really encourage people to fish the rocks as much, only because it's quite dangerous. I do it. But I know which spots you can access and which tides and which sea conditions. And I always put safety first. I wear rock boots. But for the average guy that turns up and just goes down on the rocks with his double pluggers and isn't familiar with the sea conditions, it's not recommended, to be honest.
And not necessary anyway, because you can catch pretty much the same species off the beaches.
That's what I mean. Like if you're fishing Moffat or Shelley in the corners there, you're literally fishing that rock
Same
anyway.
structure, yeah.
So you'll still get those reefy species coming off the reef and going for a swim down the gutters to have a look at what bait's in town as well.
Yeah, perfect. So walk us through tackle for that, mate. Do we need our big, 12, 13-foot surf rods, or can we get away with smaller, lighter gear?
It actually does help, to be honest, yeah. Like I would use minimum 9-footer in a situation like that. There's some really nice, lightweight 9 to 10-foot short casters now, and you can put a 4 or 5,000 size reel on that, 15 to 20 pound braid, and obviously same deal. You can mix it up between plastics and metals depending on what's around at the time, and just good fun because you can blast a big cast out on that sort of gear now.
Yeah. A metal on one of those would just about disappear over the horizon, wouldn't it?
Well, that's right. And to be honest, it does at times bring other species into play, even mac tuna and bonito and schoolie mackerel, and that actually do come in close enough to be caught off the rocks and off the beach from time to time. Not frequently, but it does happen.
It does happen, yeah. And presumably you could also throw slow pitch jigs and that sort of thing and do horizontal jigging in those spots.
Yeah, for sure. You tackle store owner's best friend when you're doing that around the rocks, but
you don't mind, you're happy for people coming in by tackle.
Absolutely, yeah. But you definitely go through a bit of gear in that sort of area, but the rewards can often be worth it. So
So it's kind of broken bottom. The beach is sandy, but you're casting around those rocky headlands, so it's broken bottom, it's reef, there's
if you see any like drone footage or aerial photos from high up above there, you'll just see its structure everywhere. There's reef all the way through there.
When you're casting high-speed jigs and slugs and things, that's easy. You cast it out, count it down a few seconds and crank it straight back. Nothing much to that. But when you're fishing the soft plastics and other lure styles around that area, give us a few tips for that.
Yeah, look, it's always a balancing act between not getting snagged and getting your lure in the zone. So I always like that, if possible, connecting with the bottom without getting snagged. If you can bounce it amongst the rocks, that's the ideal scenario. Things like snapper and that, you can fish it a little bit different because we're only talking relatively shallow water. They'll rise to eat a lure, so you don't have to make contact with the bottom for snapper and that. But generally, because it's fairly shallow, you're going to contact the bottom anyway. So.
Okay. And your plastics, what would you recommend there in terms of sizes and
you don't have to.
Sort of stuff?
You don't have to go big. Sort of that 4 to 5 inch stuff is plenty. Again, you can roll a paddle tail through there, or you can bounce a jerk shad. I really like that sort of jerk bait style in that sort of scenario. If you got the wind in your favour, like if it's a sou'wester and you got the wind on your back, and you can go right down in jig head size, and you get more hang time, that's when you're probably going to get your snapper.
Right.
Stuff like that.
Yep. Okay. All right, and with the jerk shads, just working it back with twitches and hops and that sort of stuff. Yeah,
little twitches like the do-nothing retrieve works really well for snapper as well, but because it's so shallow, you don't get a huge amount of hang time. Like when you're fishing out in 10 to 15 metres, that's the only way to fish them really, but in the shallows, you got to keep working it, just keep it off the bottom, obviously.
Yep. Okay. All right. Tides, conditions, you've already said the southwest wind's a good one.
Exactly, yeah. Well, when you get, obviously, whenever you get a wind from the west here, it knocks the sea down, so it just makes things more favourable for fishing. Having said that, you don't want it completely glassed out because the fish use the white water to their advantage, and you do want a little bit of wash because that's what they use to hunt their prey. If the bait can see them coming, they lose their element of surprise. So a bit of white water is always good. I should just quickly mention too, because it is a form of lure fishing, excellent squid fishing in that area as well.
Yeah, okay. Yep. Yeah, we've had whole episodes that have been dedicated to squid fishing. So
yeah.
Tell us about the time of year for that and what jigs to use and that sort of thing.
Generally winter time. So they do like almost glassed out condition. So squid will come right up on the ledges and look for bait. But same thing, westerly winds, which is generally our wintertime fishing here.
Okay. And these are northern calamari or tiger squid, is that the?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Cool. All right, mate. Tides, are they important along the beaches and headlands?
Yeah, it is. It's one of those things where I always reckon the best time to go fishing is when you got time to go fishing.
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
Yep.
But probably on the beach, the high tide, again, is a winner. Those gutters fill up with water and fish come in there. Obviously, we were not really talking about the rocks themselves, but if you do want to fish off the rocks, then obviously it's a low tide deal because, you want the rocks exposed so you can get out, fish those holes and gutters.
Yep. All right, anything else we need to know about fishing Shelley Beach?
No.
Got it covered, all right. So that's number 3. So we reckon our way through them. So Military Jetty, we've got New Bribie Bar, and we've got Shelley Beach. What's number 4, mate?
Well, I thought the Boardwalk was number 1, so...
I told you I'm extracting an extra spot out of here.
Yeah, so. I got to come up with another one now that I hadn't thought of. But no, look, there's plenty. I think the next one would have to be inside the canals. So Pelican Waters Canals has to be.
So walk us through that, mate. I must admit I have spent some time in the canals chasing jack, so I've got a little bit of insight as to what might be coming here, but walk us through and tell us what we need to know.
Look, no doubt, and you hit the nail on the head. The mangrove jack is by far our number 1 target species in the canal. There's plenty of other things in there, of course. Brim, obviously, trevally, queenfish, tarpon, but generally we're fishing for jack. And it's a typical canal scenario where you've got rock walls, pontoons, all those places that jacks like to hang, where the bait sits, bridge pylons. So it's no different to anywhere else you'd chase jacks, really. It's all about structure, particularly during the day, and then at night they go roaming and you can catch them just about anywhere. But it's a pretty healthy system, lots of bait in there, lots of herring, lots of mullet. And basically, there's plenty of spots to access the canals that are public. So, there's walkways around bridges, there's parks, the odd vacant lot. So you can access the canal without a boat, and you can access it without necessarily getting a homeowner's permission, I guess.
Yeah. So walk us through. And for me, typically a system like this, and I'm actually looking at it at the moment on Google Earth as we speak, and a system like this, I'd fish down the front of it. I'd be looking for bigger tides, where there's a bit of structure, a point, a bridge pylon or whatever that's going to get hit by the water flow.
Yeah.
And I would probably have a whole bunch of spots marked out. If I was land-based fishing, I'd have a whole bunch of spots marked out. I'd fish one of them for 20 minutes, half an hour, and if there's no joy, I'd jump onto the next one. What's your strategy, mate?
No, that definitely would work for sure. You can even follow the tide up the system But yeah, of course, the most obvious spot when you look at a map is the mouth of the canal there, because you got rock walls either side, you got a bridge, and you've got a massive, pretty much all that water flow coming out of the canal and in from the bar. So it's a natural highway, and of course that area is probably the most heavily targeted, and there is a park there as well, so you can fish it from the shore. So yeah, that's where you'd start. The other spots further up the canals, because there's a lock system, there's weirs. So there's man-made barriers that flow depending on tide and rainfall, etc. Yep. So when we get a big influx of rain and there's a new push of water and bait coming over those weirs, that's another place worth targeting.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, with jacks, I mean, early morning, late afternoon, you can catch a jack every minute of the day, but obviously, either real early morning and late afternoon. Huge fan of things like Lucky Craft, G-Splash, the 90mm MMD splash prawn. That sort of neck size popper works really well, particularly early morning. They seem to be a sucker at first light. After that, you probably have to go to like a suspending jerk shad and start fishing a little bit close to the structure. The sun comes up, they definitely go and hide around those bridge pylons and slightly deeper rocky areas. And then at night, it's a different program again. You can literally bounce plastics and things out in open water and see results. Huge fan of the Shad's 4-inch tough prawn. That's one of my go-to jack plastics. And yeah, those heavy hitters again. In two scenarios there, I'm either bouncing or rolling a paddle tail, or I'm bouncing a prawn off the bottom.
Yep, okay.
Either of those seem to work from time to time in their own situation.
Yeah, I want you to make me envious here, mate, because living in Cairns, there's tons of jacks up here, but you know, a 50-centimetre fish, they're pretty scarce. What's a good jack down there?
Well, we haven't even talked about the landlocked spots, but but the big dogs are in the landlocked spot. So the 70s that are landlocked. But if you get a 60 wild fish, like when I say wild, they're not
in the moving water.
In the moving water, that's a ripper. Yeah, that's a ripper. Like, we're happy with 50s too, don't get me wrong. Like a 50, 55 is quite common, but you still pump. Like, it's a notable capture. You know, any jack's a notable capture,
Absolutely.
really.
Any jack's a good jack.
Yeah,
for sure.
So, but yeah, 50 is your benchmark, and then if you get a 60, you're definitely high-fiving. And there's other little spots that have Jurassic Park stuff.
Yeah, be too scared to put a kayak on there, mate.
Yeah.
All right. So look, that's 4 spots or even 5 spots down, depending on how you want to count them.
Yeah.
But I believe you got one more, mate, and it's a pretty special sort of fishing.
Yeah, there's a fairly substantial Barramundi population here, and I sort of haven't been talking about it much because it's kind of the locals only, you know.
Right. Yep. Private fishery.
But there's more and more barra turning up here every year. There's no doubt about it now. For whatever reason, whether it's dams overflowing, whether it's, you know, water temps, whether it's whatever, I don't know why, but they're making themselves quite at home here. And it's not just Caloundra, it's right around the Sunshine Coast now. There's barra in the Mooloolah, they're in the Maroochy, they're in the Noosa. They're even down the Gold Coast
Gold
now,
Coast as well, yep. And even in northern New South Wales.
So you can actually go and target barra now. And obviously with the modern electronics available to us now and live scope and stuff like that, it's not even, is that a barra? It's like, there's a barra there.
Yeah.
In fact, there's 10 barra there. Yeah, so pretty cool.
Oh.
So it's early days, really. Like, a lot of the locals are still sort of, you know, sussing it out. There's a few guys that have been doing it for a long time, and they've been catching barra here for 10 or 15 years, probably at least, and keeping it to themselves. But I suppose the secret's out now, and more people doing it, and we're noticing just by the lures that we're selling that there's a lot more guys targeting barra here.
So, mate, I'm not going to ask you where to go and fish for these, but you know, I know there'll be people listening who are interested. Guys, what you need to do, you need to go and visit Dave in his store, and he'll give us the details about how to find him in just a minute.
Yeah, come and have a chat to Andy and myself. So we're probably known better on socials as Ori and Granny. So Andrew Orr is Ori and David Granville is Granny. So we're Rockstar Tackle on TikTok and and Instagram. So that's, everyone knows Granny and Ori, and we do our lure of the week every Friday on TikTok. So we have a bit of fun with that. So we've been mates since we were kids. So and now we own the shop together. So that's pretty cool.
Excellent stuff. And Dave, you're willing to disclose some places to go and look for barra for those that actually come in and buy some tackle off you, right? So don't be going in there and asking Dave where to fish for barra if you're not going to buy any tackle, but definitely go in there.
No, we've got a minimum $200 through the door policy. No.
You got the barra tax?
No, just kidding. But having said that, we're more than, that's one of our points of difference is we're in the business of catching people fish, and anyone that knows Andy knows that he loves a chat, and he's more than happy to spend some time with you and give you the good oil on what's going on around the place at the time. So.
Yeah, excellent. All right, so where can people find you, mate?
We are at 7/8 Tay Avenue in Caloundra. So the main street of Caloundra is called Bullcock Street, and basically Tay Avenue runs between Bullcock Street and the Boardwalk. So everyone knows the Boardwalk and Bullcock Street, so we're right smack bang in the middle. So you can't miss us. Big Mangrove Jack logo on the top of the shop. If you can't find a park out the front, we've got parking out the back as well.
Excellent stuff. And mate, what's your lure of the week this week?
Oh, I can't tell you that. You're gonna have, absolutely.
Too early in the week?
Yeah, well, I know exactly what it is, but you're going to have to see Rockstar Tackle on TikTok or Instagram to see what that's going to be.
We'll put some links in the show notes. So, folks, if you want to go and if you want an easy way to find that, jump over to doclures.com and just type Dave Granville, GranVille, into the search bar. That'll bring up this episode and Dave's previous episode as well. There'll be an MP3 you can download, a PDF you can download. Most importantly, though, there'll be some links, some details about where to find Dave's store. There'll be some details on where to find them on TikTok and Instagram as well, so you can find out what lure of the week is this week and get involved in all the fun. So terrific stuff, mate. Hey, it's been a fantastic chat. Lots of great information shared, lots of great fishing spots, and all land-based, all accessible without even a car in a lot of cases. So you can walk to these spots.
Walk from your hotel room.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. Look, really appreciate you sharing that. I've enjoyed the chat and look forward to talking to you again soon, mate.
Yeah, my pleasure, and look forward to seeing everyone in Caloundra.
Thanks for listening to the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast. For free show notes, downloads, tools and resources, please visit our website on doclures.com or consider supporting the show by joining Team Doc Lures to receive exclusive members-only episodes, tools and resources. But for now, tight lines and may the fish be with you.